What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. So for this movie review, we are taking a look at Satan's Slaves. So this is an Indonesian horror film. It's deemed a supernatural horror film. So, and I've said this before, when it comes to supernatural, I think it can be, I don't know, I see supernatural as ghost, evil spirits, things like that. And then I see demonic possession or possession by a demon, exorcisms, things like that, as a completely separate subgenre of horror outside beyond supernatural. So again, this one is deemed a supernatural horror film, but it does dabble in a bit on the possession, but without coming right out and saying it. So I'm not sure exactly how, as far as from an Indonesian perspective, how they view it. Again, it's being deemed a supernatural horror film. So again, that's the path I'm going to roll with, even though they hint at some type of demonic possession in it, but never come right out and say it. So I think it might have been left open for interpretation. But we're going to roll with it as just a supernatural horror film as far as the subgenre goes. Now, this film has been out for a minute. This one came out in 2017. And so almost 8 years now this film has been out. But again, like some of the films I've been watching lately, this isn't one I've come across many people have seen or even know about. And may have just saw as you can see on the screen here, the title as well as the front image of the film and just pass right over it. Or I know a lot of people don't like subtitled films, period, let alone subtitle horror films. This is one of those. It is a subtitle horror. It is subtitled. So if this isn't something that you're interested in, because it is in Indonesian, so if you're not a subtitle person, then this would not be a film for you. So I would say pass over it. However, I would still say give it a try. If you watch it, and I've always said this before, if you watch movies in a silo, watch them from what they are. I think you can find some greatness in it, so to speak, meaning that you can find that you like a film versus if you try to compare it to other things, you may not like it. So this one, though, we're going to run through. So I'm just going to warn right now, spoilers, if you haven't seen this. But it's been almost 8 years. If you haven't seen this film by now, odds are you weren't ever going to watch it unless someone recommended it to you, or if you just were stumbling across it one night on Shudder and you say, hey, I'll just give this one a try. So I'm going to go into some spoilers, but I will keep the summary pretty high level because, again, I don't want to go into too much detail in case any of you all want to go check this film out. And side note, there is a sequel to this film called Satan's Slaves Communion. I will be doing a review on that later today or by tomorrow. I want to make sure I do both parts to this film. But it's interesting, though, that this film is actually Satan's Slaves. This first one here is actually a loose remake prequel to a film from 1980 that goes by the same name, and Satan's Slaves Communion, which is a sequel to this, but also still serves as a prequel to the original. So the original film that came out in 1980 now really serves as the third part in the trilogy. I know that might have been kind of confusing, and why they did that, I'm not sure, but that's what they did. And I have not seen the 1980 film. I'm trying to track down a copy of it. I think it might be a bit difficult considering it came out in 1980, and it's an Indonesian film, so it could be a little bit difficult to track down. And if I am able to track down a physical copy, it's whether or not my region locked player can even play this particular region. So getting into the film. All right, so this film focuses on a particular family that lives on the countryside. It is 1981, which would make sense because the original film was made in 1980, and this is a loosely remake prequel. I would imagine it's going to happen around the same time frame. So you have a family that lives out in the countryside. There's 4 children, all aged from 22, 16, 10, and 6. And those ages are going to be important as far as the film's premise goes. Now, this family is living on some hard financial times right now because the mother is ill and bedridden, has been for, I think they said either 3 or 5 years. I think it's 3 years, if I remember correctly. And they used to be a well-off family because the mother used to be a singer. She had a very successful singing career, but now that she's been bedridden and ill for many years, all of her royalties have kind of just dried up. They're long gone. There's no one's buying her music anymore. It's kind of dated, and the fan base has moved on. So again, the family can't account for that money coming in. So the father is doing all he can to keep the house that they have. But he did take out a mortgage on the house, and the home's not even his. It's actually his mother's. So they're living, the kid's living with the grandmother along with the father. But again, they're having a hard financial time while trying to pay for all the mother's medical needs and just general living expenses. So the father, knowing this, needs to leave town. To try to leave the farm area, the remote area, go into town to make money. But prior to doing that, though, the mother is bedridden, and leading up to her death, the oldest daughter, which is really the primary character of the film, I would say, her name is Rini, and she starts to have dreams. She's starting to see visions of her mother. And she has this one particular dream where her mother is standing up by her window, and the mother has this bell. Because she's bedridden, she uses this bell the best that she can to alert the family that she needs something. So the daughter was hearing this, goes upstairs, but sees her standing at the window, only to turn around and see her mother laying in the bed still. So now she's seeing like a demonic version or a supernatural version of her mother plus the real version. She wakes up from this dream only to find herself in that exact same scenario, goes upstairs because she hears the bell. The mother is standing at the window, and as she quickly turns around to look at the bed, the mother's not there. This is in fact her mother, who collapses and passes away right there. So this now then leads us again to the father leaving the house, going into town, got to make some money, leaves the kids there with the grandmother. Now this is where things start to really take shape now. The grandmother, again, not very mobile. She's in a wheelchair. She's very stationary, right? She can't really move around as much as she's elderly. So she's riding. The last we see of her, she is playing with the youngest child, Ian, who is 6 years old, and he's the key. He's the key to the whole film. He's 6 years old, and the grandmother's playing hide and seek with him, keeping him entertained. And he is deaf, so the only way he can communicate is through sign language with the family and through like vibration. So there's an example where he's playing hide and seek with the grandmother, and the grandmother's knocking on the walls, and he's feeling the walls to track, to find her. So they have this, I guess, I don't want to call it a special relationship, but, it's the best relationship that you can have with the youngest grandchild, so to speak. So we then see the grandmother garnering concern of what's happening in the house. The mother is now dead. She knows something, but hasn't shared it with the family. So she writes a letter, but that never is able to send it before she passes. Now, she passes in a very dramatic way. The kids go to look for her, only to find that she has fallen down the well that is in part of the house. So the family gets their water from a well that's secluded in one section of the house. They go and they find that the grandmother has fallen into the well and drowned. Now, this isn't it wasn't an accident. You can tell it wouldn't have been an accident because the kids believe that, she was trying to get water, she fell in, and she drowned. Well, if you see the movie, you can tell there's no way she could have done that, to lower a bucket and pull it up. She wouldn't have had the strength to do that. So she's the first victim of what's going on. So as we continue, Rainey and one of her friends go to take this letter to the individual who's written on the envelope, only to find out that this individual is a longtime friend of the grandmother. They grew up together, and this individual is an occult writer. So he researches occults in the region and does magazine articles, writes things on them. And he writes this article, gives the magazine to the daughter, takes it back. Her older brother, the oldest brother of the group, who is 16, Tony, reads it, has a conversation with the sister, only to find out that this is where now the pivotal information comes into play, where they believe that the friend believes, and then the article believes that there's a satanic cult that provides fertility to women who are barren or can't have children, and but part of that deal in allowing them to have children is they must provide their last born child to the occult once they turn 7. And this is why it's key that if you notice when I said the ages earlier, they're currently all 6 years apart, and the youngest Ian is getting ready to turn 7 in 3 days. So this is where they now realize that the mother would have had to have given over Ian in order to, follow the rules of this occult, or the entire family would be killed. So they don't necessarily believe it, but as the film goes on, not only does Rini start seeing images, but all the kids start seeing their dead mother walking around the house. They eventually see the grandmother walking around the house, which then leads them to believe what the mother did was in fact true. And another key point to this is that it touches on not just the fact of the mother not necessarily being fertile, but the father as well, because the grandmother never really approved of their relationship because of his profession and the fact that he might have been infertile as well. But again, they made this deal with this occult, and this is what's transpired. Now, father is still not in the picture, and more deaths seem to occur. One of Rini's friends is killed, is run over by a truck, who tried to help them, tried to warn them. The father ends up coming back home while the kids are all experiencing these visions of the mother. He doesn't necessarily believe it, that they're seeing it, but he is aware of it. It does come out later on because the oldest daughter, Rini, does approach him and then puts him on the spot saying, what were you talking to mother about? Because there's a scene before she dies that he's sitting on the edge of the bed saying, have pity on the children, as if he's talking to not the mother, but this demonic entity that might be in her or just in general, to leave the children alone. So the film moves on. The father shows back up at home, takes the kids back to the house, realizes, hey, we're going to have to sell the house. We can't stay here any longer. We have an apartment in the city. We're going to take what we can, and we're going to leave, the next day. They go through all this, and there's supposed to be a car that comes and picks them up, but no one ever shows up. But who does show up is the entire, they start getting this entire occult shows up to, a sense, take the little one. And he doesn't want to he goes out there, says, I'm not giving up my son. You're going to have to take him from me. And then they all, in a sense, disappear. But then what shows up are what they're called as pakong. And these are ghosts that are wrapped in cloth, as you would wrap but depending on your religious beliefs, you would wrap bodies in this particular cloth and you would bury them. So now there's all these, they look to be like zombies, but they're really look more like people that have risen from the dead, literally just right out of their graves. They're covered in mud, they're covered in dirt, and one of them happens to be the mother, and one of them happens to be the grandmother, who's attacking them and trying to get the youngest one. And the youngest one now all of a sudden is like, oh, I'm happy to go along, and is going along with them. And eventually one of the friend from school times for the grandmother shows up to save the day, shows up with this van because he realizes what's going on, gets there, saves all of them except for the little boy, except for Ian. He ends up going out into the woods with all these members and is as happy as can be. And the father says, no, we have to go back for him. And the friend says, look, that's not your son. He never was your son. He was always going to be like this price to pay to this occult for Satan. So he's really never been your child. He's always been Satan's child. And they leave him there. They make no bones about it. They make no effort to run out in the woods to try to save him. They're just taking this as the gospel and taking the friend at his word and said, okay, let's head out of here. And they leave him. And then we do a time jump. We do a 1-year time jump where the family is now living this normal life in an apartment, and they have this neighbor that comes over to them to help them with food because, again, they don't really have a lot at this point still. And when the lady goes back to her apartment, she's talking to her husband, saying, we have to keep them here as long as possible, and because we have to have another harvest. It's time for another harvest. The husband says, no, you need to be patient and wait. And during that conversation, they pan over and there's this big jar of like these little red like seeds, and these red seeds were used earlier in the film and by each one member of the occult that were standing out in the woods, who dropped them all on the ground, that were eventually found by the daughter, that led to this uprising of dead bodies. So again, not having seen the second film, I don't know where it's going to go. I couldn't even imagine where this is going to go, just for the simple fact that the little boy is gone, and the story, the premise is based on the last born child. None of the other kids would be affected, and since the child went along with the occult, you would think that the needs have been met, the contract has been fulfilled. But just the simple fact that none of the siblings or the father made any attempt to get out of that van to try to save him, just in case the guy was wrong, I thought that was pretty interesting. Rating time. I'm going to give this one, again, I'm watching these in a silo. I'm trying to enjoy them for what they are. This one I give about, it's mid, 3.5. I mean, there were some parts that were very slow, and then it would start to pick up, and then it would slow down and pick up and slow down again. It wouldn't stay on this constant rise of intensity and then keep building and building and building. It always kept going up and down. So just as you thought something was going to happen, you were getting into the film itself, it would be a slow burn for another 10-15 minutes. And there were some pieces where it doesn't feel like this aspect of the story is even necessary to continue on. Why is this here? So there is a little bit of, I'll call it, fluff in the film itself, but overall a 3.5. I am going to be watching the second film either today or tomorrow to get my perspective on that one. So more to come on this franchise. But again, Satan Slaves from 2017, Indonesian film, supernatural horror film. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. If you've seen the film, if you haven't seen the film, if you haven't seen it and you're interested in these types of films, again, it is on Shudder currently. So is the sequel. But again, you can check it out there for streaming, unless you have another platform that it happens to be on. But Shudder is the only place I believe it is on currently at least within the US. So if you're US based, I think that's the only place you can find it right now. All right, everyone, that's going to do it. Again, drop a comment in the comment section. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And we will see you at the next one. Peace.